There's lots to learn from our panelists who have been handpicked from around the world. They would be either cultural entrepreneurs or system enablers or stakeholders in some form or the other. And I'm sure that you're going to find their insights, experiences, and learnings super useful in your own journey as a cultural entrepreneur, wanting to do business with the rest of the world. Aditi is going to talk to us about purpose driven leadership, balancing profit and purpose, and new and emerging models of funding. So we don't have to be limited to just the Silicon Valley model anymore.
So, part of my career, for the first part of my career, I spent being a journalist and working in the media. And then the second part of my career, I actually, I've worked in different capacities supporting entrepreneurs. I've worked at an incubator, at a fund, educational programs that work with entrepreneurs. And then I finally decided to make my life even more complicated and become an entrepreneur myself. So I've kind of seen this at different angles, which is why hopefully I can bring some of those insights to today's conversation. As you mentioned, Unlock Impact is the company that I started that we look at two things. We work at the intersection actually of social impact, entrepreneurship, and gender. So even within the entrepreneurship space, we are a bit more focused on women-led businesses, women who are early stage, setting up businesses, growing them. And I think there is especially when it comes to cultural entrepreneurship, you do find like a lot of women do tend to set up businesses that are more sort of community focused, working with handicrafts, arts and culture, all of those kind of things. So hopefully you can bring some of that together for today's conversation. Yeah.
Do you really think it's necessary for cultural entrepreneurship to be boxed into this impact as a subset of the impact economy, or can it step out and be part of the mainstream economy?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I think that, of course, the obvious answer is that it can very much be part of the mainstream economy. And I think in some ways it is. We've always had like festivals and exhibitions and, literature festivals, art festivals, music, film. And so, in a very broader sense, it has always been part of mainstream, but it's just that it's very fragmented. And then when you bring in the entrepreneurship and investing lens, specifically in India, we still have at some level a roti kapda makan kind of approach, right? In the sense that a lot of the focus on entrepreneurship and people who are investing it is in solving huge problems. And like even a small problem that reaches a lot of people in India, in the scale of things, it still seems like, like, okay, a few thousand or a few lakh people is not, but people want to solve for like 1 billion, right? And therefore it tends to go into the zone of technology, financial inclusion, health, livelihoods, the big problems, education, because we're still struggling with all of that. So when you look at it at that lens, cultural entrepreneurship kind of tends to get relegated into like more patronage. It's something that people support because it's a nice to have, and but we still have that, but there are bigger problems to solve, right? But at some level, it is very much a part of the mainstream. We actually have very successful cultural entrepreneurs, especially in like film and music and stuff, right? Like, Diljit Dosanjh is one of the most successful cultural entrepreneurs we've had recently. So that is a great example of, what that can do and the economy that is built around him. Like I live in Goa. I'm not in Goa right now. It's, but for example, like we have these festivals around this time of the year. There are two, three there's the film festival, there's Serendipity, which is something that's been launched more recently, or like, there's the Jaipur Lit Fest. So these are all actually very good examples of, an economy that has come up around all of this stuff. Tourism, it's promoted a lot of activities, and Serendipity especially is a great example because it's multimedia, multi format. It goes, it's dance, music, but also like local artisans. It talks about ecology, and it's because people are now coming in to actually attend this festival, it's boosting tourism as well, right? So it's actually covering all aspects of it. And that's as mainstream as it gets. So yes, short answer is I think definitely possible, but I think why some of these people are managing to do it is I think you definitely need to economic impact you have to demonstrate. I think that's the sort of first, most important thing. And I think in today's day and age, definitely being able to harness some level of technology, um, so that something things can be done at scale. I think these are definitely two things I think that would help to mainstream it more. And of course, institutional support, right? Government partnerships, civil society partnerships, all of those kind of things. I think so. To summarize, I think like it is there. It is part of the mainstream, but it's very fragmented. And people look at it with different lenses. But I think if some of these things came together, and some people are managing to do it well, then I think it can have that broader impact.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So there are cultural entrepreneurs doing successful businesses in pockets, but it's not coming together to build a cultural economy for a state and the members of the community of that state. And I think that's where a more concerted effort needs to be made. And what's also interesting about the examples you mentioned is obviously they've all told very interesting brand stories, and they've
Yeah,
created brands and properties that have become aspirational and can be repeated and scaled. Like now, the JLF goes to so many locations, even beyond India. We have
exactly.
Jaipur Literature
Yeah,
Festivals
yeah.
across the world now. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that story building aspect and the brand building aspect of building cultural enterprise.
So we're in a very crowded digital space now, right? So there is, on one hand, people have to really compete for attention, and therefore because of that there is also, there is doubt around authenticity and all of those kind of things. But at the same time, being able to reach people in other parts of the world, all over the world, what we're doing right now, right? Like, and digital, and being able to do it in such a cost effective way, I think is huge. So it's really about the digital communication, I think, is very has become very integral to really building strong brands, because you can actually, you can put so little money into it and actually get a very good return on investment. um, but that's where the sort of fear around authenticity and everything comes in. And again, I think I always tell people, like, if you kind of there are several brands that I think have managed to do this, right? So there are, I mean, there's the sort of big mama of this is Fab India, but there are other brands that have actually, they've stayed Forest Essentials, I thought, was another good example. Chumbak, stayed very, they've built brands, but they've also stayed very true to what they are. And Chumbak is a very good example of that, right? You know exactly what kind of products it is, what they are about. Fab India has gone through an evolution, but they've always, and I think all of them have a few things in common. One of them being that they're very purpose has always come first for them, right? And if that is so, that, and I think that's where the authenticity piece comes in. If there is purpose, it doesn't necessarily have to fall under this thing of social impact, but there's a very clear purpose, and that purpose is communicated, and that is part of the brand, and it's not just sort of like just like a washing that you're doing, but it is who you are. People can't be fooled easily. Like, we know, you can't take a customer for a ride. People, you can tell when something is inauthentic. And I think, increasingly in this digital space, people are looking out for that. Younger people, but everyone is, people are sort of aligning more with brands that display certain values, and they wear their values on it. At one time it used to be like, okay, your core values are just sort of something that is very internal, but the brands that are actually building strong stories are actually wearing their hearts on their sleeves and their values and putting them out there and following through with that. And I think everything else will fall into place. How do you, market? How do you communicate? How do you reach people? But if this very clear purpose, what are your values, what do you stand for, I think, that's one big part of it. um financial sustainability of course is integral to this, because that's when you see long term sort of effects of what you're doing. But profit and purpose, so your goals that you're setting need to be around both, right? What is yes, you want to reach certain, a certain level of revenue or profitability or whatever, but also what does it mean in terms of what is the impact or the purpose of your brand? What do you want to? And I think often people, like, the thing with non-profits or NGOs is that it'll be only impact focused, and the thing with the for-profit organizations, it's the leaning is more towards the
Profit
revenue
side.
goals and things like
Yeah.
that. So but making this front and center as a core mission of the organization, I think, is super important. And also being able to show that you're reinvesting, right, in the cultural values that you're standing for. So allowing, it could be a simple thing of, like, taking a part of your profits, but putting it back into something to preserve certain values or community initiatives that you're working on. I think these are some of the ways. So I would say if this is there in the organization, it will sort of get communicated better. And that's how you build a brand from the inside out.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is really interesting because from what I'm hearing you say, purpose can actually be leveraged to build a stronger brand story.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be at a cross purpose at all. While a totally commercial organization might make compromises, say, on the transparency in the supply chain or how much they're paying the artisans that are producing the stuff. And similarly, on the other end of the spectrum, an NGO might be completely focused on the well being of the artisan, not caring about the scale or the revenue that's actually coming through. So, a cultural enterprise in the middle might be in the best position to balance the purpose and weave that into the story to actually charge a premium, saying that we are so mindful of, say, the supply chain, making sure everything is fair trade, that we may have to charge more than a
absolutely.
competing commercial organization, but that's a choice you're making.
So in India, and Raj spoke about this as well, right? It's a more complex market. Over the last 10 years, like, the whole sort of investing landscape has, changed a lot, and it's big checks are being written. But like I said, very focused on more on these sort of big mass tech solutions. Um, However, what has also happened is that there has been sort of, great, gender lens investing, for example, has definitely gained traction, and also more sort of blended finance, where it's not just pure VC investing, but different kinds of models that actually will support smaller organizations that have, like, impact at their center. So that's how India's kind of changed. In Southeast Asia, it is a bit more emerging. So in terms of like sizes of businesses, ticket sizes, it's still a bit smaller, and the focus there again tends to be a bit more things like health and livelihoods, very true there as well. But for example, climate resiliency, ecology, these are things that people are focusing more over there, and definitely a rise of, like, HNIs, family offices. So what I mean to say by all of this is that there's a lot more options now. So while everything, as an entrepreneur, as a cultural entrepreneur, everything, I always say, like, people think, like, Shark Tank, it's not always Shark Tank, right? Like, you don't have to go there and, like, have 5 minutes to pitch and someone writes you a check, and it's great, it happens, but that's like a really, really small percentage of people, right? There are a lot of other options out there, and all types of financing available. I mean, I'm talking about financing because we're talking about scaling businesses, and one is not going to happen without the other. So I think it's more of, that's where a lot of awareness and understanding needs to come in, because there are a lot of other options. And we see a lot, and therefore, and I mentioned this earlier, because we work primarily with women entrepreneurs. um, Women entrepreneurs do tend to launch more community focused initiatives. It's it's quite common to see them sort of solving problems around them, right, for the community, working with artisans, working with handicrafts, things that are more very organically sort of circular in their economy and everything. So we do actually see a lot of those, but that's where the disconnect happens. Like, these are not businesses that those big VCs are looking to support. However, there are other options. There are grants, it's slower moving, they're a little more, there are more limitations to them. uh, and a lot of our work is around sort of talking about the fact that there are different ways to build successful businesses, and it's not only this one, like, Silicon Valley narrative, of this is, so that's yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that there are different options. It's slower, it's more of a patience game, and it's not necessarily this very classic form of, like, investing, but there are options out there. And I think if we have to just think of building these businesses differently and not looking at them as these, like, crazy, like, unicorn growth kind of thing, and that's fine and that's okay.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think opening up our minds to the fact that there are many models for funding today, and you might even begin your enterprise with a grant or a fund, and then once you've proven the model, you might actually find
Exactly.
more interest from traditional investors as well.
I'm based in India, but my partner is based in Southeast Asia, and we have challenges even sometimes just working across the regions, right? And especially when we want to get into, like, financial transactions and things like that. So I think one of the critical things that would really be very helpful is, what kind of commercial and legal support could entrepreneurs get? That just information. How do you navigate certain, how do you navigate certain systems? Where can you, what are the kind of things you can apply for? I think those are some very, those are not the sexy things that people talk about, but those are actually the very useful things that will help you, because sometimes you just need that kind of information. So I think that's a great starting point, really, for anyone who's looking, whether it's entrepreneurs in India sort of wanting to go abroad, or, cross border relations. I think that's a great starting point, and maybe that's something that's, sort of more tangible and practical, to start focusing on and thinking about. So yeah, I just want to leave people with that.